Welcome everybody to with no countdown today. That probably freaked some people out. I'm not gonna lie. We're trying some different things here on the Canvas live stream, and super excited to have Katie Fielding with us today to celebrate hashtag A11Y, which stands for ally, right? A11Y, and then
accessibility, actually.
it stands for accessibility. There we go. I'm learning new things every day, and Katie always keeps me in check on the accessibility side of things. I got to know Katie a little bit when she was on my podcast with Marcus Painter, the Canvas Casters. Katie was a guest on there. Just a fantastic episode where we talked about UDL and accessibility and usability in the digital space. And obviously, we're going to focus on the Instructure tools, which is CanvasLMS, talking a little bit about how accessibility plays into some of the things that we do. Canvas actually just created a brand new page, a brand new resource page for you as a user that's looking for more content and more resources on accessibility. And obviously, we're celebrating the Global Accessibility Awareness Day, the GAAD. So we're hashtagging that with all of the content. Please like, subscribe, do all the things, share with your friends. This is going to be a fantastic session. So if you are joining us, I got news for you. Katie is a pro and she's got a ton of resources to share. She's got lots of things to talk about. So I'm super excited. Please let us know where you're from in the comments if you have questions. I'll be manning kind of the back end as she's doing her presentation. And then if anything comes up between now and then, I might pop in and we'll just have a discussion. But Katie, you have a pretty engaging, something that this passion doesn't just come out of nowhere. There's a story here, right? To the passion about accessibility.
Yeah, I myself am a disabled person. I was born with cystic fibrosis, the genetic lung disease. And while I don't have a disability that prevents me from having any barriers to accessing media or text, as a disability activist and advocate, I just feel like that's an important part to be an advocate for all disabilities, not just your own. So I've definitely in my career of teaching had students with disabilities, and making sure that I'm not putting any barriers up to their learning process has always been something really important in my classroom. With
that, Katie, great segue. Time to take it away. I can't wait to see what you have in store for us, because you're a rock star, and I'm so happy that you've decided to join us today and share what you've got.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. All right, so today I'm going to talk to you about some tips for making sure all of your content that you create in Canvas is accessible. The Canvas tool itself is a robust tool that is built with accessibility in mind, but we as content creators, which is what teachers are, we create content, we design content, we design learning experiences for our students. We need to make sure that those things are accessible as well. So the title of my presentation today is Be an Ally. It looks like ally, but again, hashtag A11Y actually stands for accessibility. So it's the first letter A and the last letter Y and the 11 letters in between. So let's go on our journey. For those of you who may be low vision or blind, there are no images in this presentation that are relevant and important for the content. They are all decorative. So you are not losing any context by not being able to see an image on the screen. I just want to remind you, as you're learning today with me, to practice those expert learning skills that we talk about in Universal Design for Learning. So practice self-regulation, get comfortable, take in the information that is helpful to you. Perceive if it helps you to turn, minimize the screen and not look at me speaking, that is great. If it does help you to look at slides, I'm going to put those in the chat, and I think Eddie will pass those to the chat so you can look at the slides directly as they help you. And the last part of being an expert learner is to go after this and take some action and put the learning that you've done into your classroom. I did mention Universal Design of Learning, and if you're not familiar with that, that is a framework that has three focuses: providing multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. Today's presentation focuses mainly on that middle zone, the representation. So making sure we're providing our students multiple means of accessing the information we're providing them. So accessibility falls nicely in there. There are things that are about accessibility that are technical that actually aren't part of UDL, but are more technical accessibility. But the things I'm going to be talking to you about as a teacher do all fall into the UDL range of things as well as accessibility. So before we get to like the particulars, the how-tos, I really want to say, why do we want to make content accessible? And one, it is legal. It is a legal requirement to make all of our content an accessible form to our students. We are a government worker. Most of us are in public schools. And so things that we create have to follow those ADA guidelines. It is also professional. If we are trying to be professionals in our field, it is good to follow professional practices of creating accessible content. And last, the one that's most important to me is the ethical consideration. We do not want to put barriers up for our students' learning. So making sure that we're making things accessible to all learners and all users is important. Next, who are we talking about when we talk about accessibility? We talk about some of the common disabilities. So those who are blind or have low vision, so may have issues with the sight aspect of the senses. Those who are colorblind. About 8% of Americans are colorblind, so that can affect many students who might be in your classroom. Those who are deaf or hard of hearing, so issues in the audio or auditory zone. Limited mobility, so maybe students that have cerebral palsy and maybe have limited mobility of their limbs. And then the neurodiverse, so that can be a wide range of diversity in our students. And lastly, accessibility is for everyone. Everyone benefits from accessibility. So by making all of your content accessible, you are improving the learning outcomes for all students. So some people say it takes time, and I don't have time for that, but you do because the outcomes for everyone are so worthwhile. All right, let's get into a little bit of how to make things accessible. And I have 3 resources here that I love and I rely on, and I definitely recommend you go use later. So the first one is the Accessible Education Materials, the National Center for Accessible Educational Materials, and that's part of the CAST.org. That is a great place to go and learn how to make some accessible stuff. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0, those are the global standards for web accessibility, a great place to go as well. And I love the website WebAIM for accessibility how-tos, really great detailed information about alt text, which I'll be getting into in a little bit. All right. Before I also get into some more particulars, I just want to remind everyone and describe what a screen reader is. So a screen reader is a tool on the computer, built into the computer, or maybe a software program used inside the computer that allows someone who is low vision or blind or maybe has a mobility issue to navigate their computer. So they would speak to their computer and tell them where to navigate. They listen to what the computer says to navigate. And sometimes, people using screen readers can listen up to 600 words a minute. So they are processing auditorily very, very quickly. And they use that screen reader to navigate the computer. I just wanted to differentiate that from something like Immersive Reader, which is built into Canvas and is amazing. But that is a reading enhancement tool. So that is to enhance the reading process. That does not help someone navigate the computer. So some of the things that I'll be referring to today that you can do as a teacher are to help those students using a screen reader. And you may say, well, I don't have any students using a screen reader, so why do I want to invest the time in that? Well, things that I'm going to talk about also improve the situation for students using mobile devices, people navigating with their keyboards. So again, while it may be something to do for accessibility for a special group of people, it really helps everyone. So there are 4 main categories to accessibility, web accessibility. And we like to use the acronym of POUR, P-O-U-R, to represent those 4 principles. The first one is the perceivable, so what you can see and experience with your senses. The second is the operable, so how it works and can be navigated. The third is the understandable, so how comprehensible what it is online is. And the fourth is the robust tool. So actually, as educators, we really need to focus on the P, the O, and the U. The robust is going to be the tool itself, so Canvas. So Canvas is a robust tool built with accessibility in mind, so we can focus on the first three. All right, so let's get into the perceivable. This is the content as it's available to the senses, like sight, hearing, and touch. The first thing that we can do as educators is write alt text for our images. So when we put images onto a page in Canvas, you have that option to do some alt text. And we want to write good alt text in those spaces. So not just putting something there, but we want the text that we write to show the context and function of the image on the page. The second thing in the perceivable zone is to hide links in words related to their context. So you want, if we were to take the student to Canvas as a link, you want the link to actually say Canvas and not be the URL copied and pasted. That way, if someone is using that screen reader, when the screen reader gets to that link, it will say Canvas. And the student would know, oh, if I click the link, it's going to take me to Canvas. It's going to describe to that person where they're going. It's going to give them that function. So that's the second thing. The third thing is I love embedding stuff in Canvas. It makes it so good, especially for our L students and our little students to not have to leave Canvas to go do something if we can put it right there on the page. But embedded stuff does not work great with screen readers. So it's very important to also add a link to that content above the embed. This is also really important for students using mobile devices. Screen readers just don't work very well with embedded content. Captions and transcripts. So these are very important. So whenever you're putting a video, you want to make sure that there is captions included. If you are creating a video and you upload it to YouTube, they will do automatic captions, but you need to go back and edit them. The same thing in Flipgrid Shorts. If you make your videos there, go back and edit the captions that are automatically created. And the same thing in Canvas Studio. If you upload a video, before you publish them, go back and do that review phase and actually look at them to make sure they're accurate. You'd be surprised at sometimes the words that come out that you didn't actually say. In the same line of captions, transcripts are important. So if you're having your students listen to a podcast, and I love podcasting in classrooms, providing a transcript to students as an alternate means of representation is very important. And some students will need that as a necessity. So captions and transcripts, don't forget those. The next thing is logical order. And so this is making sure your content, your text is well organized, the grammar is good, the spelling is good. I'll be honest, this is probably, the spelling and grammar is probably my biggest area of weakness. But it is important because if those screen readers get to words that are poorly spelled, it's going to have a hard time reading it to the user. Create accessible tables. And this is usually the point in the presentation when teachers come with their pitchforks for me, because tables should only be used for data. And I know that many of us love using a table to lay out buttons. Maybe we use those, create a graphic in a Canva or Adobe Spark, and we'll put that button onto a page for students to click to get to a location. And we use the table to lay it out nicely. But that just should not be done. Tables should be used exclusively for data. And I'll show you in a few moments some formatting considerations that you need to take into account when you do that. The use of color. So color should never be an indicator of importance. Earlier, I mentioned that 8% of people are colorblind. So if in your directions you put, do the items highlighted in green, well, if that student can't see green, those directions are problematic. Or even telling them to do something with colors. So definitely colors should not be used as directions or to highlight importance. Another thing with color is contrast checking. And I'll show you a website you can do this with in a moment. But checking to make sure that the text and the background color are a good contrast so that those people with low vision can clearly see the words is also an important thing to do when creating content. And then the last thing in this area that I'm going to speak about is readable fonts. So making sure you're choosing a font that is legible. All the font in this whole presentation is called Lexend, and it's a font I love and has been shown to be developed to support those who are dyslexic. There are lots of different readable fonts, and actually there's been some studies done, and depending on your reading need, you prefer different fonts. So there isn't one font for all, but there are definitely some fonts that are better than others. So sans serif fonts, the ones without the little tails, are better in general than the ones with. So keeping that in mind. All right, so I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share. All right. And I'm going to go into Canvas. And so I have a little bit of a module to go through some of those points in the perceivable zone that I just talked about. So I talked about alt text and writing good alt text. And here I have an image. Actually, it's the cover image of this presentation. So it says, be an ally, create accessible Canvas content. And it has the accessibility symbol, which is that man or woman with their arms out, human with their arms out, encased in a circle. So when we see that symbol, we know accessibility. So when we're in Canvas and I click on the image, a tooltip pops up that says image options. And when I open that, it automatically fills in the alt text with the file name. So technically this will pass the accessibility checker because there's something in that box, but that something is just not good enough for us. So we need to change that alt text to what it says. So you can say text, be an ally, create accessible Canvas content, symbol for accessibility, and then included, human, surrounded by circle. Grammar on that is not great, but that gives you the general gist of what needs to be included into the alt text. Now I would want to check for the spelling. So I love Grammarly. I have that installed. And then I can say done. So now I have alt text that is meaningful. It gives the person using that screen reader real understanding what is on the page. The next thing that I want to talk to you about and kind of show you in space is those linking rules. So here I have a link to a Wakelet. And so if the screen reader came to this link, they would just see wke.lt, and that is not going to mean a lot to the screen reader, and it's not going to be helpful to the person using it. So I'm going to put accessibility Wakelet, because that is actually what it will take them to. Highlight it, and I'm going to put that link in. And I'm also going to put this link in the chat, Eddie, if you want to share that link to that Wakelet with everyone. So again, putting your links within text that is meaningful is important. The next thing, I'm on my Canvas page, and I have a Wakelet here, the one that I just shared with you, embedded on the page. And you can see that above that embed, I've added the direct link to it. So again, for that person using a mobile device or using a screen reader, they'll be able to open it in a new tab and utilize the screen reader on that actual page. Additionally, when you embed a Wakelet, which I just love Wakelet, the immersive reader is not built in on the embed. So if a student wants to use that immersive reader, a great reading tool, they need to open it in a new tab. All right, so that is embedding. And the last one that I got for this topic is tables. So I have a table here. You can see it is data. So I'm going to go into edit mode on Canvas. And what I need to do is I need to highlight this first row or this cell I can go into and go to the table in the menu and go to cell properties. And I need to turn this cell type into a header cell. That's going to tell the person using a screen reader that that cell represents the data that is completely below it. So anything below this cell is going to represent time, and it's going to be in the time column. Same thing for part A. I need to go and change the cell properties to a header cell and save. And then that will say anyone that or any part that was part A, this is the data that goes with that. And you would just repeat that for every column. Now, if your rows were the header information, so your table went the other orientation, you would do the same thing and you would do a header cell, but now it's on the left side row. So again, I know it's hard to think about not using tables to format things, but please, it would really go a long way with accessibility. And then the last thing in the perceived area that I talked about is a color contrast checker. I like this one at WebAIM a lot. You put in the hex code, the 6-digit code for your text color, and then whatever the 6-digit code for your background color is, and it's going to tell you if you've passed or not. So you typically want a ratio of 4:1. This is 10.3:1, so we're good. All right. Let's go back. All right. And we're going to go on now to the next zone, which is the operable zone. So this is the way someone interfaces and interacts with the website itself. And there are a few things that we as educators, when we're creating content, can do to make this a better experience for users. So the first one is to organize your structure with as few clicks as possible. So I know we all love doing things like breakout rooms, and sometimes a lot of clicks are necessary for those activities. But if you're not doing one of those activities and you can put as much content in one space instead of students having to click through and click through and click through, that is the better practice. Thinking about those students with mobility issues and them having to click through and how that could be cumbersome. The next thing is to be mindful of GIFs or GIFs, however you prefer to say them. That flashing content can induce seizures, so it can be life-threatening. So really be mindful if you can choose a GIF that shuts off or stops moving after a certain time, or choose ones that are a slower movement if you're using them and use them sparingly. You'll notice there's no GIFs in this presentation. I love a GIF, but I do have to be mindful of who I share them with and where I put them, and presentations just aren't the place. And the next thing I want to talk about is headings. And this is the maybe a new item to you. And this is using paragraph headings when you put content onto a page. I think it's easier if I show this one. So let's get to it. So going back to that module that I had, I have some text on a page. So maybe you've created a Canvas page where you're providing students notes. I know, I think back to when everything was paper and I would just come to this text that I wanted to be a heading and I would just use the font size and make it bigger. And it'd be like, yeah, now the kids can see it. It's bigger. But that is not the best practice. The best practice is actually to highlight that text and to change the heading. To change it to a heading. So, because I've changed the text font now. So use the headings. This one up here, the title of the page is always heading 1. Then the next heading is going to be 2. And the next level, like a tree, a tiered tree, is going to be heading 3. So this will allow someone who is using a screen reader to quickly navigate through the page. Like I told you before, they can listen up to 600 words a minute or more. So this screen reader will read to them quicker than you can hear. Use heading 1, causes of climate change, rapid industrialization, and they can decide where they want to go quickly and then read the further information. It's just like those of us who have vision scan a page for what we want. By putting these headings in and using a nice hierarchy tree, we're allowing those users to quickly get to the information they need. So that's headings. All right. The next thing is understandable. Is the information understandable that we are providing the user? So this is actual content on the page. And so I have a couple tips for this. And one of them is using a plain language editor. I like the Hemingway editor. It is a web app that you can copy and paste your text, and then it will tell you if there are wordy sentences, run-on sentences, if a sentence could be simplified. It will tell you the reading level. So that is a great second reader for you to go over, especially directions. When we give directions to students, making sure they're clear using very plain language can be helpful. And then another thing that I do at my school and we've done that has been very helpful for students is the course navigation in Canvas. We have a consistent order. So, home, announcements, modules, grades, no matter what class they go to in our school, it is consistent from class to class. This has been especially important for our newcomer students, our newcomer L students. They know exactly where to click. They're learning those word recognitions in the new language, and having them being in the same place in every class is very helpful for them. All right. And again, the last one, clear instructions, which that Hemingway editor can help you with. But also, there is nothing like a human editor. So get a friend, have them read your directions, and make sure they're clear as you think they are in your head. I know that happens to me often. And as I've said before, the robust part of accessibility is all about the tool. So we as educators, there is nothing for us that we need to do in this category. If you are a tech supervisor, this is where you need to make sure you're picking a robust tool for your school or your district to use. But yeah, in the case of Canvas, this is all controlled by Canvas and not the content that we as teachers create. One great feature of Canvas is the Accessibility Checker, which you find in the bottom right corner of that rich content editor. And it is a great start, but there are things that the Accessibility Checker cannot get. So it can't tell if you did anything with color in mind. So if it can't do a contrast check on color, and it can't say, oh, they put directions that said, do the items in red. So that's something you have to check with your human eyes. It cannot detect poor alt text. It just detects the presence of text, alt text. So make sure that alt text is good. It cannot detect if a video does not have closed captions. And it cannot detect if the page is written clearly. So those are all things that we as creators have to go through and check with our own human eyes. And if you just start doing these practices in the beginning, it's much easier to build accessibility in as you go than to go back at the end and do all the fixes. So try to just start doing these practices as you create. Another thing is to make sure all the documents you're creating for students are also accessible. So Office 365 has the accessibility checker built into every tool. Google Workspace, you can use the Grackle Docs add-on to check accessibility. And PDFs, if you have to use them, I avoid them at all cost because they are hard to do accessibility well. You use Adobe Acrobat Pro to make accessible PDFs. And you probably need a 5-hour class to teach you how to do that even minimally well.
Yeah, I was going to just pop in here because I remember being a teacher and we were going through some accessibility training, and it was like, stay away from PDFs at all cost, right?
100%.
Like there are no ways that will allow that. There's screen rate, like all kinds of things kind of get really messy with accessibility when you use PDFs to present content or throw content out there. So
100%.
just something to think about, but we know there are hundreds of thousands of educators out there that are like, oh, I got PDFs everywhere. What do I do? But
yeah,
you
can
do
just
what
put
you
the
can.
text on the page.
Right.
Yeah, it's a thing. All right, and basically that's all I really have to share. I really want you hopefully to walk away today and think about creating with your heart and for your students and being a accessibility ally. And I'd love for you to feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions or comments or feedback about my presentation today.
Katie, the love is starting to roll in here from LinkedIn. Geraldine says, very clear and concise while targeting each zone. Thank you, Katie.
Yes,
again, I think it really shows those that have an extreme passion for this topic. And Katie is always when I think about, accessibility and UDL and all of the usabilities and the way we need to be thinking about, each learner and making sure that we're, catering to them when we create content inside these LMSs and these places, wherever you decide to do that. That's people like Katie exist and that they absolutely love to share resources. And I went ahead and added that link again in there in the chat. So it's katiefielding.com/canvas. She's created her very own link for us today, which is awesome.
I did. Yeah.
She is the instructional technology coach at Prince William County Schools. Katie, is there any other way you would like people to get a hold of you? Do you have anything out there that could get it? I mean, is Twitter kind of the best way to collaborate with you on social
I'm on
media?
Twitter. Yeah, definitely the Twitter.
That's pretty much the go-to for everybody right now. And obviously a lot of love coming in. So we definitely appreciate you, taking your time today and just sharing your passion for accessibility and usability and UDL. It really has been a fantastic day. We've created some blog posts and some things to kind of celebrate with this global accessibility awareness day. There are 2 A's in there, so I kind of every once in a while I get them jumbled. But as always, thanks for joining us, everybody. If you'd like to get a hold of Katie, obviously she is at Katie F on Twitter, or you can get a hold of her on her website, which we've shared in the comments. So track those down. We appreciate everybody joining us today. As always, keep learning out there in Canvas land.